point that we need to make in this passage is that sin then makes you a target for more sin. When you're caught in sin, when there's a lifestyle sin in your life, when you're caught in that sin, you become a target for more sin. Genesis 38, verses 12 through 14. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, there he is again, went with him. That means trouble. Now Timnah is just a few miles from where they live, so they go up to this area, this sheep shearing country, and take their sheep to get it sheared. When Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enom, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. So now Shelah is old enough to be married, but Judah hasn't done anything about it. And Tamar is there without anything. She's just been shoved back into her parents' house. She has nothing to show for her time and for what she gave to Judah and his family. Tamar was left with nothing. Her husband had died. Her second husband had intentionally kept her from receiving any benefit of the family inheritance. And the third husband that could give her children so she could receive some inheritance had not been essentially commissioned, which meant that the third son, Shelah, would receive the inheritance and leave her with nothing. So you see what was happening? Shelah was going to get everything. She was going to get nothing. So she concocts a plan. She pretends to be someone else and to deceive Judah. Tamar knew that her plan was going to work. Now listen to me. What she's doing here, she goes and she pretends to be a prostitute. And she knew that her plan would work. Why did she know her plan would work? Because she knew Judah's character. She knew Judah. She knew that this would work. That says something about Judah. It also says something about Tamar. Let's look at this passage, 38 verses 15 through 19. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute. She covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and he said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you, she asked. He said, I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said. Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked. He said, what pledge should I give you? She said, your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand, she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. And after she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. So the young widow gets pregnant. Don't think that's not going to raise some eyebrows. But what is also so disturbing here is Judah's moral character. This apparently wasn't his first time around the block. He knew exactly how to negotiate a deal with a prostitute. He knew exactly what he was doing. And note that Tamar also knew how to negotiate the deal. And that says a lot about her. This is just as ugly as it gets. Which leads us to the next point, and that is that sin steals your person. Sin will steal your person. The person that you are becomes a victim to your own sin. You steal the person that you are. Your sin will steal your person. I want you to see this. Tamar asked for three things as a pledge. You see that in that passage? She asked for a seal, she asked for a string, is what the NIV says, and she asked for his staff. Now these three things represent Judah's person, the person that he was. The seal was his identity. The seal was a ring that was used, it was worn on the right hand, and it was used for making agreements and contract. It had a unique design with its implanted in the ring itself, and they would pour hot wax on a contract or an agreement. You take the ring and you push it in the hot wax, and that would leave your mark. It was sort of a legal signature, and so that was his seal. She asks for that seal, his identity. It's like asking for his credit card, and so she says, "Give me your seal." So he gives her his ring, his identity. The second thing he gives her is the string. And the string represents his reputation. We're not exactly sure what is meant by the word, but it probably refers to a unique piece of woven cord that was used to hold the turban in place. They would have these turbans, you've seen the pictures of them from that culture, and they would have the turbans, and there would be this cord that tied the turban in place. And the cord identified your position in life, and it sometimes identified you with a particular belief system. But it is your reputation. It is who you are. It is what people think of you. Your cord represented a lot about your person. And so she asks for that cord, his reputation. The third thing that she asked for is his staff. The staff was his security. The staff was primarily used for protection and security when navigating the difficult terrain. And it was handmade and it was hand carved, and it had its own unique little design for each individual that had it. And so what we see here is that sin will destroy and steal your identity, your reputation, and your security. That's what sin does. And that's what happens to Judah. So now Judah, who has agreed that he's going to give her these things and for her to hold until he sends the young goat to her, he decides that it's now time to get his identity and his reputation and his security back. And he sends the young goat with his friend Hira, but Hira can't find the woman. Don't know who she is. And so Genesis 38 verses 20 through 23 says, "Meanwhile Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adulamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, 'Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enom?' There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, why don't we just let her keep what she has? Or we'll become the laughing stock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but he didn't find her. Now, here's what happens. This is what Judah was saying. I'm afraid people are going to laugh at me, so let's just forget it. Let's just forget it. And he's giving up his identity, his reputation, and his security. The consequences of sin. And one other thing, he says, "But you know what, Hira? You're just as much to blame as I am." Start sharing the blame. Hira, you're the one that couldn't find her, so you're kind of at fault on this too. And so, it's sort of your fault. And that's what sin does. As it steals your person, then you start looking for excuses and you start blaming other people, and you refuse to accept your own responsibility for your own sin. So fear of what others think causes Judah to give up his identity and his reputation and even his security. And that leads to the next point, and that is that sin traps you. You're trapped. Now Judah is trapped. He has no identity. He has lost essentially his reputation, and he has no real security. He's vulnerable. He's completely vulnerable to the world right now. And so in Genesis 38 verses 24 through 26, this is what we see. About 3 months later, Judah was told, 3 months later now, "Your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." She goes home. She's a widow. She goes home, and now the baby bump shows. And people realize, wait a minute, you're a widow. Why are you pregnant? You have been having an affair. And so they accuse her of prostitution. And Judah says, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." Now, Judah was not in a place of authority to be able to say that. He didn't have that kind of authority. He's in a town there that he has no authority in. Remember, he's not in his hometown. He's down in this Adullam area. And so what he was saying was, "Bring her out and have her burned to death," was what everybody else was saying. And he was just basically agreeing with it. Everybody's going to say, "She's a prostitute. We should, we need to stone her to death. And in that culture, instead of stoning her to death, they burned him to death. And so he's like, "Yeah, bring her out, burn her to death." I mean, look at, And to him, he's thinking, "No skin off my back. She's, she couldn't produce any children for or for Onan. And so, she's no good to me." And he has no idea what's happened, that she was the woman that he was with. So yeah, he's going along with it, and he's saying, "Yeah, go ahead and burn her to death." And she was being brought out. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law, to Judah. And she said, here was the message: "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said, and she added, "See if you recognize whose sealed cord and staff these are." Judah, here's the understatement of the Bible, Judah recognized them. There was a big gulp. Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her again. The implication of that last passage, "and he did not sleep with her again," is that maybe he had continued. We don't know. There are actually a couple of translations that do just the opposite and say he continued to sleep with her. The idea that he married her. I don't think that's true. because there's no indication in any of the lineage that he did, that he took her on as a wife. So I think Judah, and this may have been the point where Judah repented, we don't know. It certainly looks like it. It certainly looks like there was a sudden break in his life where he suddenly realized, wow, I have lost everything, and now look where I am. Judah, in his indignant hypocrisy, condemns Tamar. And in spite of the fact that he had essentially disowned her, left her with nothing, all while he knew he was guilty of consorting with a prostitute, speaks to the character that Judah was, and she traps him. Sin traps him. The Bible says in Numbers 32:23, be sure your sin will find you out. You may be sure that your sin will find